It has been a turbulent time in our nation's capital, even before the deadly rioting we witnessed on January 6th. At Connecticut's Capitol, the tone is different, and the Speaker of the State House plans to keep it that way. Joining us this morning is State Representative Matt Ritter. Welcome, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to ask you, how is the tone of government different in Connecticut than what we've seen in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't have the same level of, I think, disagreement in the sense that we can't talk to one another and work things out. Our rules on opening day in the House were done in a bipartisan way, negotiated those with our counterparts very, very closely. The committees that we have, our screening is done in a bipartisan way. That's a system I inherited, and it's a system I intend to keep.
Well, let's change gears and talk about COVID. In your opinion, what is the most important legislation being considered at the Capitol right now when it comes to COVID, and is there bipartisan support for it?
You know, I don't know that it's one particular bill, right? I think what it's going to come down to is going to be our budget, right? I think the budget document that we produce for the next biennium, for the next 2 years, will say a lot about our values here in Connecticut. Now, look, we might be aided by additional federal support, which would be wonderful. But you have kids who haven't been in school, in some cases, since last March. You have people who didn't have summer camps and enrichment. We need to think about making sure that we fund workforce training for those people who have been put out of work, continue to support our small businesses, think about after-school programming and summer school programming for kids. That's going to be the major priority, I think, this legislative session for COVID, is our response, our reaction once we get over this national nightmare.
Right. Well, the governor's emergency powers expire next month. Has he talked to you about extending them at all? And are you and fellow lawmakers open to extending them?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do talk about it. Right now, under the statute, the governor can have up to 6 months, right? He could have they expire on February 9th. I would not agree to a 6-month extension. I think the facts on the ground are very different than they were last September. Having said that, if I asked the Connecticut General Assembly how many people should be allowed at a fitness club or a restaurant, we'd get about 1,000 different responses. How about a church? You'd get 1,000 different responses. So what I would say is, on things like a mask mandate and capacity and different things, it's better to be run by executive order. We can quickly change and pivot depending on vaccination rates and hospitalization rates. And because we're in session, the legislature can always overrule or override any executive order of the governor. So my view is shorter time frame for emergency powers, but is there a necessity for the next couple of weeks at a minimum? Absolutely, in my opinion.
Do you know, is there any legislation in the works to help out restaurants on a state level?
So as you know, the governor extended about $35 million in additional aid to restaurants a few weeks ago. We have the $1.7 billion stimulus package passed by Congress in December, which is a lot of money for the PPP program, a lot of that going to small businesses. If we need to do more, I think that'll be a big part of the conversation. And I hope that, again, that's bipartisan. This should be a bipartisan budget, particularly with the expected on the state side and on the federal side. If everybody brings their priorities to the table, I think there's a way to make it all work. And that's my goal.
When you see surrounding states taking steps to open up, as we just saw with Massachusetts extending hours for restaurants to stay open, what's your reaction to that?
You know, every state's different, and I don't know the facts on the ground in Massachusetts. What I would say about Connecticut is 2 weeks ago, we had a positivity rate of 10%, and that sort of snapped us all back, right? So like, oh my goodness, things are really out of control. And then just yesterday, it was at 4%. If we can stay at 4%, if hospitalizations continue to decline, we get vaccines into people's arms, I think the governor will again respond to that, and I think you'll see us, mirror our neighbors more. But I'd like to see a few more weeks of consistency before we open that back up.
Well, legalizing sports betting and recreational marijuana are out there as two significant issues in front of the legislature. Do you think they will make it to the governor's desk at the end of the session?
Oh, I don't know. It'll be close. The marijuana debate is going to be a razor-thin one if it passes. Again, I think at a minimum, if we don't have the votes to pass it, we will vote, hopefully, to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot so the voters can decide, like they've done in other states that have legalized it. So that's probably the default position. Sports gaming, I do think will happen. I've heard the negotiations are going well with the tribe, so I'm confident about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for Connecticut in terms of what the Biden administration can do for the state?
You know, the first thing I'm looking forward to is the Biden administration being just boring for a couple days, not having to read outlandish accounts in the newspaper, not reading Twitter feeds and handles that I think are bringing Americans apart and not together. So actually, I hope it's a quiet weekend for President Biden. He does what most presidents have done, Republican and Democrat, for so long, which is just run the country steadily and with a fair hand. But outside of that, we are definitely looking for aid to states and municipalities. There's no question that every state in this country has been hit hard. That's a big priority. Additional money for vaccines and testing. And I hope that they will, one of the legacies of the last 4 years, I think, has been a lot of repealing of environmental laws and statutes that I think are very, very important in this country. Everyone, I think, knows the serious problems we face with global warming. And I think the Biden administration is really going to recalibrate that, which makes me very comfortable and happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's end on a lighter note, right? There's
Sure.
been talks about getting a new state dog. So what are the chances of that here in Connecticut?
Well, I am very, very partial to golden doodles.
Okay.
I have a 12-year-old golden doodle named Dublin, so that's my vote. But look, we get all kinds of bills every year. I actually put a bill in 4 years ago that in the month of March, the state bird would be Sue Bird, the former Yukon Husky, and that didn't get a very good reaction. So maybe the state dog will do better than my Sue Bird idea.
What's your reaction to a husky?
I have no problem with Huskies, but again, partial to golden doodles. But
Yeah.
we'll have that. If we have to have that debate, I'm sure I can bend and support a Husky.
All right. Well, thank you so
All right.
much, Speaker Ritter. We appreciate your time this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Well, that is all the time we have this morning. CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley is next. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.